Hi, everyone. My name is Alexandra, and I'm from Etherspot. Etherspot is an account abstraction development platform that provides frictionless Web3. And I'm so excited to moderate this panel discussion about account abstraction standards. First of all, I would like to say thank you to our amazing speakers for joining us today. And we have Martin from Zeppelin here, Anthony from zkSync, Henri from the Starknet Foundation, and Nicolas from Ledger. Guys, could you tell us a bit about your background and what is your relationship with account abstraction? You can start.
Sure. Can you listen to me? Hello, my name is Martin. I work at Zeppelin. I've been working here for like 6 years. And my relationship with account abstraction is, first of all, I'm a user. I also develop the smart contracts for Cairo language for Starknet, which has a kind of native account abstraction, so I also developed an account. I'm also one of the authors of SNP6, which is Starknet's account interface standard.
Awesome.
Hey, I'm Anthony Rose. I lead the technology team at Matter Labs, the team behind zkSync. zkSync is building what we call zkSync Era, general purpose layer 2 zk rollup with native account abstraction. So we've been thinking about it since basically day one.
Yeah, so I'm Nicolas Bacca. I've been working at Ledger as a co-founder for 8 years. At Ledger, I built several products thinking about how we can integrate hardware wallets into account abstraction. So since you know, hardware wallets are validating stuff, signing stuff, but for account abstraction, we have specific needs. So I took care of that on Starknet and for the EVM chain. And now I started a new project, which is in a stealth phase at the moment, to onboard people using account abstraction. So I will be a consumer of the standards as well.
And I'm Henri. I do DevRel at the Starknet Foundation. So I explain to people what Starknet is and how they can build cool stuff on top of it. And Starknet is a general purpose blockchain on top of Ethereum. And I guess my special relationship with the account abstraction is that I hate nonces because I've had at some point to work in a platform that sent a lot of transactions, and nonces are a pain in the back. And I really hate those, so I like account abstraction for that.
Amazing. So I think it's interesting to dive deeper into account abstraction standardization and learn more about existing standards and how did the account abstraction concept develop within the ecosystem. Could you kick off?
Sure. I guess account abstraction dates back to very early to Ethereum. I think there's a very good talk at HCC this year by Vitalik, and he explains the history of account abstraction in Ethereum specifically. And he tells a story about how it all started with EIP, I think it was 86, which is basically, if you're familiar with Bitcoin's bit-to-script hash, it's the same idea. And then it developed over the years. There was a lot of research, different problems that had to be solved. We encountered those issues over time. For example, the multi-invalidation issue, which is basically when you send out many transactions depend on a single storage slot, and you change that, and you can invalidate many transactions. Eventually, he also explains in this talk that research and development was kind of stalled because there was a big focus on proof of stake. During that time, there was alternative implementations and approaches that appeared similar to account abstraction, which are basically to enable smart accounts like meta transactions. That's when Argent, for example, appeared, or the gas station network. And then eventually, I think it was in 2021 when they finally settled on 4337, which is an out-of-protocol approach to have account abstraction. So I guess it was a long road over here. And I think 4337, along with the advent of LCHIS with native account abstraction, kind of boosted the recent interest on account abstraction because account abstraction solves lots of issues, as we've seen during the whole day.
Do you guys want to add anything else here? All right.
I think understanding the history is super interesting, because when we look at it from a high-level point of view, account abstraction is about abstracting different things, but not everybody wants to abstract all those things. So sometimes we speak a lot about abstracting the validation, so abstracting how the signature is going to be verified, but abstracting the order of transaction with the nonce, as you mentioned, or abstracting who is paying the gas fees is part of the three pillars, I would say, of account abstraction. And depending on the implementation, depending on the chain, we might have three of those properties, or only some of them, and that's probably something we can dig in a bit later. And so I think it's interesting to look at it from a high-level point of view as well, and why standardization was necessary, as you said, very well explained in the Vitalik talk you can see, and in the HCC recorded talks.
And why do you think the account abstraction topic became quite popular just recently? Because I believe everything has started like even from 2017, right? Why it's just recently became quite...
Yeah, I could say even 16, which is when I think EIP 86 appeared. I think it has to do with we're getting there. It's now enabled because 437. I think the very first EIP that actually had all the solutions to the main issues like the multi-validity and non-subtraction issues was 29 something. I'm really bad at numbers. I think that was the very first EIP that covered the whole thing, and that appeared, I think, in 2018 or 20 maybe. I think it has to do with just now we have the actual tools and solutions. And as I said before, I think the advent of LCHIS really helped for the people to start wanting to build, and because they can, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd argue also that people have realized recently that the pool of people who are willing to put up with what we're doing right now to interact with blockchain software and blockchain networks is not going to grow that much, because we're very crazy and very patient with the state of how are things today. And if we want more people to use those products, which we all want, we'll have to meet people where they are, and we'll have to give them a better user experience. So there has been a few focus on this to get more people. And also, as Jérôme said a bit earlier on the panel, we have more block space now, and so it's a bit easier to think about those things, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add or reinforce the point there, I think the progress we're seeing on scaling solutions as well suggests we're going to have infrastructure that can support, far more users than has been the case up until now with just layer one. And scaling, I think, isn't just about let's build a virtual machine environment that you can actually push a large number of transactions through, but also how do we build an experience that you can actually bring to millions and eventually billions of people. And I think account abstraction is a big step in that direction.
And I think for 337, the thing that is a little different, regarding the competition between the different standards, is that it was, I think, one of the only standards that implemented account abstraction without consensus change, which is very important as well, because it means that there is no competition to implement it, and the validation people have to perform is much lower. It's still important to verify the entry point contracts, for example, but it creates a lot less effort than if it was built into the protocol. So that's probably another reason why it went so popular. And it had some very good marketing as well. The 4337 team has been pushing very hard, like during the last, I think it was during one of the last Ethereum events. They communicated a lot on the fact that account abstraction was getting live when it was just the entry point contract being audited. So they know how to communicate properly as well to generate a good momentum for that, which is good, because usually engineers are not very good at marketing, so it's a good difference.
That's true. So maybe let's talk a bit about limitations, because since limits are a part of standardization, what are your thoughts on the existing limits of ERC 4337?
In my opinion, Starknet currently has native account abstraction, meaning that you only have smart wallets. There's no EOA whatsoever. And so we don't really use EIP 4337 because we use something that is close, but it's not exactly that. One limitation we see with 4337 is that most of the dApps that are used and deployed on Ethereum today are not taking into account smart contracts wallet, right? A lot of them take the assumption that the user on the other end can be an EOA or can be a smart contract wallet, but most often they assume that people are an EOA, and they use that in their flow. And if you're a smart contract wallet developer, well, how do you do with that? Your users don't have an EOA. And I think that's a big limitation, right? There's EIP 4337 are great for apps that are developed now and take it into account, but it's not great for all the applications that are already deployed on EVM chains, in my opinion.
Yeah, I could agree. I could generalize that to integration issues, which is on-chain and off-chain infrastructure in general, wallets, block explorers. They have to really go the extra mile to start supporting that. And without that, if I'm a user, that I cannot see my entire transaction history on Etherscan, right now it's like a huge issue. There's also warranted limitations, restrictions that are imposed by the standards, like limitations on the validation step, like not accessing storage from other contracts, a gas limit to avoid denial of services attack. Those things about 4337 were actually inherited by many of other kind of native account abstraction systems, which makes sense. And one specific issue with existing contracts that do not distinguish between smart accounts, be independently whether it's a kind of abstraction or not, but smart accounts and EOAs are, for example, using the transaction origin to see who's using the application, and that actually has been an issue for many contracts that, well, basically Argent or Gnosis Safe were discriminated by many dApps because they're not the transaction origin of a transaction.
I think as a developer on top of 4337, it's difficult sometimes to put the needle of abstraction, what we want to abstract, if it's too abstract, not enough abstracted, and so on. And I think one thing that is not enough abstracted at the moment is that if you have a smart wallet, you might want to consider your smart wallet as a set of different modules, because there is going to be reusable code that you want to have in different accounts. I'm thinking about session keys, for example, so that's kind of defining keys that can be used for a short time for a specific application, like very popular for gaming. They don't need to be as protected as the main key for your account, and you might be able to sign a lot of transactions transparently without user interaction. That's something you want to have in different wallets. So you would like to be able to load a new module into your existing wallet to say, okay, now I want to support session keys. And these definitions of reusable modules along wallets of plugins into smart accounts was not taken into account by 4337. So there are new standards right now. I don't remember the number of the EIP. I think it's 755 something. So one of the new EIP that is going to be pushed like last week. That's part of the problem with standardization. You have to keep track of the new EIPs almost every week at the moment. But typically that's something I think that would be very useful because there is not enough modularity, in my opinion, in the definition of 4337 today.
I think maybe just to add, agree, one other limitation that it feels like at least something that we've been thinking about for zkSync is 4337 feels like a very point-in-time solution to the account abstraction problem. But already there are conversations about where is this going, and even how do we get this integrated at the protocol layer for L1. So building to 4337 today, in some of the conversations about where we're going next, it includes breaking changes, right? We have a lot of L2s thinking about their AA implementation, application developers thinking about how to integrate with 4337, but we still, I still think we might end up in a world where this is at the protocol layer, and a lot of the things we're building today maybe need to be adjusted and maybe have, some serious disruption ahead of them.
Mm-hmm. So there are various approaches of implementing account abstraction, right? And I know that zkSync was the first VM-compatible to implement account abstraction, like native account abstraction, right? Anthony, could you share how it works on zkSync and what is the difference with ERC 4337 approach?
Sure. So just for a tiny bit of context into why we used it in the first place, I suppose, given that it wasn't quite finalized on L1 with 4337, we really feel like it's a fundamental part of the sort of L2 experience to be able to provide a better UX, right? Really start to move away from some of the janky experiences that many of us are comfortable with, or at least have grown accustomed to at L1, maybe if not comfortable. And it was felt that it was like a critical part of the first version of zkSync, and we didn't want to go live without it. So it was at the time where 4337 was being developed, but it wasn't yet in a stable state. But to a first approximation, we attempted to take the ideas of 4337 and do them natively in the protocol for zkSync. So the experience of working with our account abstraction and zkSync, I think, feels very similar, or at least there's like common reference points for how it works with 4337, but it works like native to the protocol. So practically speaking, you don't have this separate mempool that we see on L1 with 4337. You have a single mempool, and really just like similar to, I think, how Starkware works, all of the accounts on zkSync are smart contract accounts. It just so happens that our default account, if you don't have code deployed there to make it a very different smart contract account, it behaves like an EOA on L1. So to a first approximation, it feels very similar to 4337. We followed a lot of the implementation details. We inherit some of the validation restrictions that are in place and limitations we'll have to think about in the future. But yeah, it's a 4337-like implementation, but we had to build it and finalize it before 337 was complete, so it varies a little.
Okay. And so Starknet, I believe they also have the native account abstraction implementation. And Henri, could you explain what is the difference with, for example, zkSync approach?
I don't know enough about the zkSync approach to make a meaningful comment on how different they are. I can explain a bit where we are and how we got there. I actually made a talk here this morning where I explained this process, but in the beginning when we started Starknet, we didn't have a spec for account abstraction, and specifically for native account abstraction, because it didn't exist. It was a pipe dream for a long time, and nobody really had spec'd it out. So we went, and we had this issue where, well, if you don't have a wallet, you won't have any users, but if you don't have any users, nobody will build a wallet. So we went with a network that had smart contracts, and you could interact with them without a wallet, which is weird, but it was fun. And so we designed the account standard step by step, working with wallet developers, with the folks at Argent, at Bravos, with Martin at Open Zeppelin. And now we're in a place which is very similar to EIP 4337. We are looking at things that work. We're going to integrate them in the actual specification. Little by little, we gave account contract a special place in the network, right? So that they can perform certain action that other contracts can't. And I think someone mentioned it. I think it's you, Martin. But one of the main things we're tackling right now is how do we deal with backwards compatibility? How do we deal with upgrading those accounts that implemented certain specification that we need to retire? How do we let those accounts evolve or not evolve without blocking user funds, which is a challenge, but it's interesting.
Yep. If I may add something, I think there's many similarities between zkSync's and Starknet approach, since both take lots of inspiration from 4337. I could say, even though I'm not super familiar with zkSync's approach, I think one of the major differences, so similarities are, it's a single native mempool, so all transactions go to the same mempool, and that's super valuable actually. That simplifies a lot the work for off-chain infra to integrate with. Another difference is that, because I only talked about similarities, is there's no EOAs. So you have this hackish way of representing an EOA that's actually a contract, and Starknet there's not such thing. Something that I actually find very interesting from zkSync's approach, actually we were just talking about this outside, I understand it's not yet implemented, but it's extending the possibilities of what you can do in 4337. For example, accessing external storage, but it's semantically attributed to yourself. For example, your own balance in a token contract, which is not your account contract, but it's semantically kind of yours because it's your address in there. And I think another limitation that's on 4337 is not calling any contract during the validation step that can self-destruct itself. And since there's no self-destruct on zkSync, you can actually call or delegate call to contracts on your validation step because you know you don't have that risk in there. I think that's very interesting, and I know that from the Starknet side of things, that's being considered. I don't know exactly what's the current stage of those ideas, but actually they're really good.
And are there any standards on zkSync and, I mean, account abstraction standards on zkSync and Starknet?
Please.
Yeah. Let me see. I don't think there is a fully written spec of this is there is not. Okay, I'm not sure there is. I know there are discussions and everybody is in sync, but I'm not sure how formalized it is and how emergent it is. And I think in general it evolves quite a lot. I think one thing we've converged on is how we spawn accounts in the network, right? How do you deploy a smart contract if you don't have a smart contract in the first place, right? So how are babies made, right? And this thing, we came up with a proper way of doing it on Starknet, so that's pretty much standardized at this point. And then the two phases, validate and execute, are pretty much standardized on Starknet.
Yeah, so I could add that that's a de facto standard, that it's not actually standardized, like formalized in a text, but that's for the protocol level kind of abstraction. There is an application level standard that is formalized and written, which is SNP6, which is having a joint work between Open Zeppelin, Argent, and recently Bravos also joined the conversation, which is basically for count contracts interfaces, which it supports, it defines the exact structure of the two main functions you call on an account, which are the validate and execution, but we also add as mandatory to be compliant with the standard to the isValid signature function, which is not enforced or implemented in any way at the protocol level, but we have this standard.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe just to add, I think my answer is actually somewhat similar in the sense that we don't have a formal specification doc in the way that you would, for example, with 4337, but we have a standard interface that is provided and well documented for developers to be able to build to, and it provides, like required methods as part of the account abstraction flow for like verifying a transaction, executing transactions, and then optional methods for interacting with paymasters and other things that people might want to do as they build smart contract wallets. But yeah, standard account interface. But no like formal specification yet. Yeah.
And I actually would expect to standards to start popping up, as Nicolas was saying before. There's still unsolved things, or maybe you want modularity. Actually, now that I think of it, there was a proposal to build plugins for accounts, which was also like a draft standard. And I would expect, as we move forward towards implementing paymasters, to see also standardization written about that.
I actually have a question for so designing those standards. Like, there's so many things you could do and you could standardize in standard accounts. Where do you put the limit in when you design a standards? How many features you fit in? For example, in SNP6, there's the two things you mentioned, right? Execute, validate, and isValid signature. I don't think there is the execute from outside function, which Axel, who was here earlier, proposed. Where do you put the limit in how much you fit in a standard before saying, okay, this is what we converge on?
I don't think I have a really good answer to that. I just want to mention, first of all, I really like the idea of executing from outside. I didn't know it was mentioned today, but I really push forward for that. I think, actually, this kind of came up a couple times. For example, I think it has to do with how general you think it is. And I personally try to live outside as much as possible, so you don't tie too tightly together two standards. So you can choose whether sometimes it's against standards to have too many standards. We have a very good joke about that at zkCD. But for example, there was, just to illustrate the point, there was an attempt to standardize the events you emit when you change the signer of an account, right? And we were about to add this into the SNP6 standard, and then we realized maybe not all accounts use signers for their accounts. So we decided maybe we don't tie this too tightly together. We don't couple this. So we decided for that to be another standard. So maybe you can think of what's the minimum necessary things you need to do in order to enable interoperability, and anything else can be another standard. That's my take. I don't know if you have.
Yeah, I mean, any standard in the end in any field is it's a political game. I mean, you have to find a common ground between different people. So if you want to push too much things, it's going to be rejected. If you want to push not enough things, it's not going to be applicable, because then you are going to have weird black areas in your standard that make things non-interoperable de facto. So when it's produced, so it's kind of finding the right mix. But usually, yeah, I would agree that it's best to put as little things as possible, just because it's easier to have the standard turn into something that's actually used.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I can't recall the name of the theory, but something says that the output of an organization is actually a reflection of how it works internally, and I fully agree. I think there's lots of politics around it. That sometimes you can see the consensus and not the perfect thing, but someone agreed this is the best we can accept. I think ERC. 1021 is a very good example of how discussion can shape the actual standard more than the ideal thing.
Yes. Yeah, I usually say that the best way to understand the standard, especially a complex one, is to look at the history of the standard. If you don't have the history, you are missing a lot of the details.
I completely agree. I usually push for having as much public conversation as possible. And it's hard when people are arguing a lot. Sometimes they go off-bound to not pollute the thing, so it's complicated.
Great. So I also would like to touch on the topic about censorship resistance. And so ERC 4337 is designed to enable account abstraction without compromising on decentralization and censorship resistance, right? So will it be an issue for zkSync and Starknet with the censorship resistance?
No. I mean, in the sense that from our end, since everything is a smart contract anyway, I mean, it doesn't change whether you're going to go through a relayer or you're going to go yourself. I don't think it's an issue because you can always send your transaction straight to your smart contract, I would say. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't really change anything.
Yeah, I would argue basically the same answer from the zkSync perspective. Because account abstraction is native at the protocol layer, you essentially inherit the censorship resistance properties of the protocol. So for us, you're able to force transactions via L1. And this effectively means that for account abstraction accounts at L2, they're able to inherit the full censorship mechanism as designed for everybody. The execute from outside context point is also a thing that's been added actually for the zkSync default account. So the idea there is that you're able to, because you need to be able to initiate this transaction from an EOA on L1, you're able to provide everything that you would need to pass the verification step for the transaction on L2. So yeah, essentially the transactions are fully censorship resistant or as censorship resistant as the protocol allows.
Mm-hmm. So as we discussed, there is a variety of account abstraction implementations, right, and approaches. And actually it brings some frictionless, some friction in terms of interoperability, right? So do you think that it's possible that all the account abstraction approaches can be interoperable one day?
Can we all be friends?
It seems like a better outcome than attempting to make them all interoperable is to attempt to find these standards, right? To attempt to agree on patterns that development teams can build to, and people can forget about how to build it the Starkware way or the zkSync way or any other way. And I think 4337 is a big step in that direction, but because it's not on the protocol layer, for anybody who is implementing the protocol layer, it's a little awkward to think about that being like the end state. And we're still in this position where, it would be really amazing if we sort of conjure into existence this standard that could be applied uniformly across L2s, and you actually are able to then provide a much better user experience for people working with these applications, both builders and users. This seems like the thing to push for. Like, where can we find common ground, rather than how do we have N implementations actually try and communicate with each other in a way that seems frictionless. It seems like a harder problem.
I think this ties back to the XKCD joke about competing standards. I think as long as right now current standards are fully compatible within themselves, among themselves. So to me, it makes sense to not all of them to be compliant, but maybe some of them are going to get more traction than others. I don't know how it's going to look like. I do feel the incentives are put in such a way that currently I don't think protocols are they're looking into what other protocols like Starknet and zkSync are looking what they're doing, but they don't actually have very big incentive to be super compatible. I think this is a wallet issue. And wallet implementers are probably the ones with the incentive to push forward cross-chain standardization. How this is going to look, I honestly don't know. It depends a lot on how adoption goes. Maybe we see 4357 fail completely, even though we put lots of work and expectations in it. Let's see how actual adoption works. And again, to me, this is a wallet issue.
I think we have the same, it all ties back to the same thing that we don't know what we're doing. Nobody is. Nobody knows what we're doing in the blockchain world has value, how people will use it, what will end up being useful or not. And so all of those standards, we're trying to, as much as we can, do our best guess of what works and what doesn't work. And people will have different opinion. And as you said, there's a matter of politics. Well, it's really hard to get everyone to converge on something, in my opinion. So people will go in their direction, explore their thing. An ecosystem that works will get people working around them and building standards there, right? Now, once you have two things that really work, the inertia to say, hey, everyone, let's move to that new standard is first of all, really hard to overcome, and second, potentially counterproductive. Maybe it will be better at that point to abstract account abstraction. I mean, abstract everything away, just make it invisible for the users, because at the end of the day, the user won't care about EIP 4337. They will care about whether they can do what they want to do in the way they want to do it. And if people manage to abstract things away and to have another standard that connects with both the standards, I think we all benefit.
Yeah, I think those are wallets.
Yeah, I think even today, account abstraction is too abstract, for users, and that's why people are talking about smart wallets or smart accounts. But even if we talked about that before, but if we look at the way that this specific standard for 337 has been designed, it has been designed by looking at what was missing previously. So there was a lot of attempts done before, like Argent was the first smart wallet in 2017. Then people noticed that it was missing. It was missing a way to decide who was going to sponsor a transaction. Then this was added into the standard because, well, it was just identified to be a missing point. But in the end, today, if we just look at the high-level concept of what is a transaction, how we verify, how we execute it, as you said, it's something that everybody agrees with. So in the end, we have a sharing point there, and that's it. Everybody knows that a good standard has to implement at least those parts, and then if another part is missing and enough people agree that it's missing, then, well, then there will be a new point.
Did Argent come before Gnosis Safe?
It was...
I didn't know that.
I think so.
No, we came after. They were there in the multi-sector teams. We came at the moment they did the V2 on Gnosis Safe.
I see. Thank you.
Exactly at the same time they came with the second version of Gnosis Safe. To their credit, they were there before.
Okay, so it gets recorded. Julian from Argent is saying that they came before, but B2 came at the same time as Argent.
But they were for teams. It was the first smart contract account for individual users.
Right, so Argent was first for individual
I
users.
didn't want to start a fight because I know.
Okay, sorry.
You ask who is the first, for example, hardware wallet.
Let's talk about.
I know
let's switch to the first zkEVM.
Well,
That's better.
Yeah, the classic.
Sorry.
So, account abstraction is a breakthrough. It's a no-brainer. But as we discussed, there are still some limitations and obstacles. What is your vision of the future of account abstraction?
Everybody using it without knowing that they are using it, as you said.
Yeah.
Probably the best possible future.
I expect people to stop thinking about keys, basically.
I think it's good in a way that people think about keys. You want people to think, for example, there's been a lot in the past few years of effort to get people to think about their security, their passwords, and so on. So it's important that people understand when they sign stuff that it has a consequence, right? Rather when they say stuff or they send emails or they sign something for their bank account, right? So it's important that people understand that they're doing actions, but I think it's really important to meet users where they are. Like, you don't want to tell to people like, hey, you're used to using your bank account, come install this new super wallet extension and then fund it with that weird token and then do all this kind of stuff so that you can do this same thing that you're doing with Face ID. You You want to be able to tell them like, yeah, you're using Face ID or Apple, or the Android equivalent or something like that. You want to meet people where they are. And to me, accounts abstraction should strive for that, and not only in how you sign, but also in the flow you have and the relationship you have with your money through your bank. Everybody wants to be their own bank until they got robbed, and I think this is also something that is really important to think about when you design account abstraction. Right? How do you offer this kind of services in a non-custodial and in a censorship-resistant way?
I think there's a wider picture of how accounts work in general outside crypto. Like you have a Gmail account, for example, and people are used to having an account in each system. I wouldn't be surprised if the Web3 merges with the web, and eventually users have their own accounts. They can use that account in many, many places. I would expect them to reason about them in the same way. Like I have an account, and I'm going to use it I'm going to identify myself in a system, and all details about keys, recovery, multisigs, whatever, are hidden away, providing the features those specifics enable, and people are only aware of the features. Like I can recover my account, I can do whatever, pay in a token, whatever.
Yeah, so I believe that we have a couple of minutes, right? And if anyone in the audience has any questions, so feel free to ask.
Yeah, so question, if say ERC-437 takes off and it becomes widely adopted, do you think that there is still place for chain-specific account abstraction implementations in the world, or everything will be just then 437?
I definitely think there's room for people to continue to build like native protocol implementations for account abstraction. As far as 4337 does make a big step in the right direction, I think there's still a conversation about what's the full vision for account abstraction for Ethereum, and active discussions about how this gets integrated at the protocol layer suggest we're not there yet. I think experimentation among L2s is healthy because it is a slightly easier environment to make a change, iterate on the change, actually like offer things to users. And where they get adoption, I think we'll start to see consensus about, is this something we can bring back to L1? I don't think 4337 is the end of the story for account abstraction. I personally don't think like having separate mempools is a great feature. And I think as we think about the future of this, I think native AA will inform designs that actually come back and help shape the future of L1.
Yeah, we're seeing the base. Thanks to Intense, we're seeing many alt mempools pop up like a lot, and that doesn't make much sense really. I think also piggybacking on what Nicolas said before, that it makes sense to have extensions and different plugins or ways of expanding what you can do, and that will necessarily depend on the features of each chain. For example, as I mentioned before, zkSync has plans of accessing storage that is not in your contract for validation step, and that's very specific to zkSync, maybe in the future for other chains as well. So I do see differences. Yep.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I was wondering if you use a smart contract account as your primary or significant wallet, and either way, why or why not?
There's a funny story. I didn't double check it, but I told this a couple of times, and I think it's true. So I used to think oh, nothing is as safe as a hardware wallet, and smart contract wallet are necessarily less safe, right? But apparently, not so long ago, a streamer on the internet, a Brazilian streamer, was doing a stream and accidentally he pulled up his notepad with all of his seed phrases, hey, who has never gotten hacked here? Yeah, see? Okay, a few people. All right, but nobody on the audience you never?
No.
I never either.
Oh shit! All right.
Wait, let's not.
Anyway, that guy got all of his wallet drained except one, his Bravos wallet, because the seed that was stored there was not the seed to get all of his wallet. It was the recovery seed for his wallet. he used his app on his phone to sign his transactions, and the seed was only at a delay on it, meaning with the seed you could take back control of the smart contract wallet, but it had a delay of 4 days. So the hackers got the seed, they could have gotten to the wallet, but he had time to actually change it and rescue his phone. And that changed my perspective on the whole thing. You can actually use and add a lot of features in your smart contract wallet to make the experience safer. So on my end, I'm very much reconsidering all of this. That's my opinion.
Yeah, in the end, but yeah, if we want to go into this topic, I would say in the end it depends on how many chains you are interacting. If you are interacting on chains where you can have smart wallets, I think it's very good to have smart wallets which are backed then by a hardware wallet, because in the end you want to protect your key and you want to know how you are interacting with your smart wallet. Like if you have, for example, profiles, if you are setting limits, how much money you can spend per day on your smart wallet or stuff like that. You want to change this on an interface where you're sure that what you are doing is really what you want it to do. So that's how I see the pairing between hardware wallets and smart wallets. In the end, yeah, myself, I am using a hardware wallet as my main wallet. So because I am active on different chains. But of course, I have a lot of safes as well. I have a lot of safe wallets because they are the best way, in my opinion, today is to have a proper multi-sig if you want to have if you want to have some good governance on your assets, which is very important.
Yeah, I'm not very fond of single key accounts. To be fully complete, I don't think this is limited to smart accounts. There's been multi-sigs for a very long time before smart accounts. For example, BitGo, it's a Bitcoin wallet that implemented a 2 out of 3 scheme, and you can see that a lot in the Bitcoin world, which doesn't have super limited smart contracts. Sorry. Moon Wallet is another very good example that when you create your account, which is a Bitcoin and Lightning account, you get like multiple keys. So it's very hard to do the streamer thingy.
Bitcoin has account abstraction.
Oh, no, you're good. My answer is actually different from L1 and L2. So on L1, actually, in terms of the primary wallet, it's definitely still a hardware wallet. On L2, I mean, it's kind of true by definition that they're smart wallets, but actually one of the smart wallets that has got deployed logic to do interesting things and actually provide a new user experience. And, starting to engage with that actually adds a lot of value. So for me, it's different at each layer.
So yeah, I believe that we have to wrap up, unfortunately. But yeah, thank you very much, guys, for sharing your thoughts. It was an amazing conversation. And thanks all to join us today.
Thank you for hosting.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.